Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30 p.m. And we'll commence our agenda briefing forum. I'd like to invite Councillor Minson to read the Acknowledgement of Traditional Owners.
Thank you, Matt. I am honoured to be standing on Whadjuk Noongar country on the banks of the Swan River. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. I thank them for their contribution made to the life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Item 3 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. These relate to the agenda briefing forum. Firstly, 4.1, the purpose of this agenda briefing forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft ordinary council meetings agenda. It is not a decision-making forum, nor is it open for debate. Members of the public that may be directly affected by an item on the agenda can make presentations, deputations, statements and ask questions prior to the matter being formally considered by council at the next ordinary council meeting. As such, questions are limited to those that appear in the agenda. 4.2, notice of recording and live streaming. All participation in this meeting will be audio and visually recorded and live streamed at the same time on the town's website. The live stream will be archived and made available on the town's website after the meeting. 4.3, conduct of the meeting. All those in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the town staff or any elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or member of staff. Questions and statements are be directed to the presiding member, who may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with responses. 4.4, public participation time. There's an opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the beginning and the end of this meeting. The opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of the meeting is limited to those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time at the start of this meeting. Public participation time will be held for 30 minutes. Any additional time must be by agreement from the meeting. It will be in 5-minute increments. Usually we'll have a limit of 3 questions per person and 2 minutes allocated per statement. However, if there are few persons in attendance with questions, we can be more generous with regards to those numbers. 4.5 relates to questions taken on notice. So responses to any questions tonight that are taken on notice that relate to an agenda item will be found in the officer's report for the ordinary council meeting agenda under the heading Further Consideration that will issue in due course ahead of the ordinary council meeting on the 15th of July. Item 5 on the agenda is attendance. We have a number of elected members who are on approved leave of absence this evening. Councillors Devereux, Miles and Hamer. We have all other elected members in attendance. Our CEO is on approved leave, so the acting CEO is Mr David Doy, and he leads a number of members of the town staff who are in attendance tonight. We otherwise don't have any apologies. Item 6 is declarations of interest. Mr Acting CEO, any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. There are none.
All right, so whilst none have been received in advance, are there any elected members who have an interest that they need to declare that they haven't already done so? No, not seeing any indication of that. So just a gentle reminder, if in the course of discussions or questions you realise that you do have an interest that you need to declare, please make that known to me as soon as possible. Item 7 is public participation time, which I'll now open at 6:34 p.m. On the list, Vince Maxwell, please come forward, state your name and suburb, and I'll then confirm with you your questions relate to agenda item 14.4. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Vince Maxwell from Vic Park. Yeah, my question's about the budget and the financial statement. In the financial report, it shows that as of the end of May, there's $13.6 million of the $60.6 million capital works program has been completed. The amount completed in June is not shown, but I'm assuming the total for the year will be somewhere around 15 million, which will leave $45 million in uncompleted works that has already been paid by us, the ratepayers. But the budget only shows 14 million in carry forward, so there's 45 remaining from this year, minus 14 is 31 million. Because it's not in the carry forwards, I assume that that you must be abandoning the remaining $31 million of works. But my question is, where has the money gone?
I'm going to refer that question to the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Old.
I'm unsure how to answer where the money's gone because we haven't spent it. It hasn't gone anywhere. But I do make the point again, as I've probably repeated 3 times. For example, Lath Lane Zone 1 is earmarked as 20 or close to $20 million in the budget, and we clearly know that's not going to happen or is under a different, potential different management arrangement. There is the bins, just to mind, is $600,000 worth of FOGO bin rollout is labelled here, which is going to be carried forward next year. So it's a very broad question. That's all I can really answer to that.
Mr. Maxwell.
The capital works program included $295,000 for the Vic Park Carlisle Bowling Club synthetic turf, and that money was taken from ratepayers 2 years ago. And I noticed that that money has now disappeared in the budget. It's not in the carry forwards. There is a new project called Victoria Park Carlisle synthetic turf with a budget of just $18,413. Can you explain what has happened there?
So, sorry, Mr. Maxwell, can you just tell me again, the Capital Works program amount for the bowling club?
Yep. It was
You
allocated
said that was
95,000.
95,000, and you're saying that's from the FY25 year,
It was
24, 25?
it's in the year that just finished yesterday, but it was actually carried forward from the previous year. So it was actually from 2 years ago that money came from. But it's not in the carry forwards. I mean, the work hasn't been done, and it's not in the carry forwards in the budget. So,
All right, so if I'm not mistaken though, there's a portion of that money was allocated on the basis that it would be coming from external grant funding, expected to come from
Yes.
the CSRFF.
that was an
with-
additional 295,000, which is not what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't recall 295,000 being the amount that we were going to be getting potentially from the CSRFF, but I am aware that a portion of the amount of money allocated for that project was going to be coming from external funding with another set amount of money approved by council at a resolution to come from municipal funds. My recollection is that that money was approved by council last year in February when we were asked to put it up for a CSRFF application, and we were required to agree by the state government that we would fund the remaining 1/3, 2/3, half, 50%, there you go. So might turn to the acting CEO with regards to that, because clearly we weren't successful with the CSRFF application, and I think we learned that sometime July, August last year that we hadn't been successful. My understanding is that we're going to be trying again, and we'll hand over to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, so there's there was $295,000 in this year's budget, which covers the cost of the entire project, and we need to have the entire amount for the project in the budget in order to be able to apply for the CSRFF grant, of which the state government, if you are successful, will offset 50% of that cost. We reapplied in March this year for that funding, and we are due to find out, hopefully, fingers crossed, next week if we were successful or not.
And I think to the last part of Mr Maxwell's question, he asks why there's a small amount of money currently in the budget for roughly $18,000, I think, or so in relation to that same project. Mr Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, so since the time that we originally costed the synthetic turf, there has been an escalation in costs, so we did have it re-quoted, and it came in as $18,000 extra. So that $18,000 covers the re-quoted amount for the synthetic turf installation.
Okay, Mr Maxwell?
But the original amount is not in the carry forward in the budget.
All right,
So how are you going to pay for it?
all right, so going to refer that one over to the Chief Financial Officer, Mr Auld.
I'm quickly scanning it. There's a lot of pages here. If it's not listed there, it should be it should be listed as a carry forward. I'll have to take that one notice and just make sure we've picked that up in the correct place. Thank you.
Let's take that one on notice to make sure. I think when I had a look through, I'd probably agree with Mr Maxwell. I don't think that I saw the bowling club's project anywhere except with regards to the very low figure of about 18,500. So on that basis, we'll take that part of it on notice, Mr Maxwell. Clearly there aren't other members of the public here keen and interested in tonight's agenda or the budget. So do you have some other questions?
Yeah, I do have a number. Just in relation to that taken on notice, due to the fact that your budget's up for on the council special meeting next Tuesday, will that answer come through before that?
Taken on notice means it will go to the council meeting upon which this item is to be determined. So it will be in the agenda for the special council meeting for next week, which should then come out, Mr Auld, probably Thursday night this week. Does that sound about right?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Thursday night this week.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have some other questions. In the last 12 months, you've delivered less than 1/4 of the capital works program. And now in this budget, you're going to add another 11.8 million of new works. Can you tell me either the number of projects or the dollar value of these new projects that are ready to go to tender? So they'll be going to tender before the end of August 2025.
All right, I'm going to go to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms Adams, to start with to ask. I've obviously heard a statement from Mr Maxwell that we haven't delivered a great percentage of our capital works program. Are you able to update us as to whether that's an accurate statement from Mr Maxwell that we've delivered less than 1/4 of the CapEx budget for 24-25?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Probably just further to the CFO's comments, I'll make a general comment on an informal analysis that we've undertaken within operations for the budget that's within our remit. I think from the original total capital works amount, if you remove the ones that are affected by council decisions, such as Lath Lane not proceeding, there was by our calcs, just over 22 million removed from that. So we were looking really at the remaining capital works. And between the works that were substantially underway and the works that were completed, we were looking at between, and this was a few months ago, about $28 to $30 million worth that was substantially underway. So in terms of saying 1/4 has been done, I do understand the figures that have been put forward, which reflect those that have been finalised and paid, and invoices received and paid. So that might be true. But in terms of the quantity of works, as I was saying, substantially underway and or due for completion, as in they're currently under contract, that is far in excess of the 25%.
All right, thank you. Now, who of Mr Auld or Ms Adams is in a position to answer the other part of Mr Maxwell's question that relates to the proposed new capital works program of the projects that will be ready to go out to tender? I think Mr Maxwell, you said by August, is that right, within the first month of
Yeah,
the budget
well-
being adopted?
Yeah, basically, I'm looking at what's ready to go now. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Who can assist with that? Mr. Old?
I can give some very, through you, Mayor, I can give some very general comments, noting that most of the items are listed are actually below the tender threshold, so they'll be undergoing our normal internal quote process. So depending on according to the purchase policy, depending on the value, we we have quotes and then up to tender over $250,000. So I cannot blanket say that everything's ready to go for a tender. That's just simply not true, because each has had different stages of design. Some of these will be relatively less complex projects, so the tender process and getting the design specs could be relatively quick. But to make a blanket statement that all going to be ready by the end of August is just simply not true, and there's no appreciation of how council operations work.
Thanks, Mr. Old. I might actually ask for your assistance, Ms. Adams. Given that the roads renewal budget is a significant portion of the new capital works program that we're planning, that obviously lists a variety of streets that are all scheduled for various types of traffic calming, road renewal, etc. And I think the total on attachment 14.4.3, which is the no, sorry, I don't want that one. I don't want the carry forward one. I want the capital works one. But the roads component is, generally speaking, the biggest one of the capital works. Is that a program which is currently sitting at 6.4 million? Does that go out to tender at the one time, or does the town issue tenders for that at different times throughout the course of a financial year for a variety of different reasons? Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. It depends on the type of work. So those that have attached funding, for example, the MRRG Black Spot, they tend to go out individually and they will go out to market at different times of the year. The ones that are part of our standard road renewals program with pre-designated works, they will generally be completed, the works will be priced together and they will go out to the asphalt contractor that we have currently contracted, unless we need to go out for tender for specific parts that are not included in that scope of works.
All right. So with regards to the roads budget for the coming year, note, for example, the biggest single ticket item is 1.3 million for the Archer Mint Streetscape Improvement Stage 1B, which runs between Raleigh and Bishopsgate, and also Planet to Mars Street. Is that likely to be one that will be relatively ready to go out to tender once budget is adopted, or is that one that design works would still need to be done before it actually hits the market for tender? Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. So that project itself will be going out to tender on its own. There is still design to be undertaken with that, and I believe there's other works as well associated that need to still be complete, and I'd expect that to go out to tender later in the year.
All right. Mr. Maxwell, I could probably continue to do that exercise through any number of the larger items on the Capital Works program, but I think you've already heard from the Chief Financial Officer that a lot of these projects we simply can't fix a date, such as immediately after the budget's adopted or by August of this year, as to which of them that will go out to tender immediately and which of them will take longer to go out to tender.
Thank you. I think you probably understand my concern is if there's no design work done, they probably won't get done in the year because of the time you hit Christmas.
Fully understand your concern, and I think Council shares and understands that and has been having the necessary conversations with the administration about that.
Okay. There's a couple of anomalies in here. I've got a few of them here. I'll just mention one of them, so I don't want to be here or not. In the budget, there is an amount of $32,500 to replace a Mitsubishi Triton registration 117 VPK.
Could you list the page number and the attachment? Are you looking at 14.4.1 or are you still
I'm
looking at the Capital
at
Works
this in
program?
the financial statement, so it's 14.2.
Right, so this is
May.
the monthly statement, all right.
Yep, so it's 32,500. It's shown as being expensed. Sorry, that's in the budget. There's a capital works item to replace that vehicle at 32,500, but in the financial statements, that shows the town has already spent $44,929 to replace the same vehicle. So it's like the vehicle's replaced, was just paid for in May, and there's a budget item for $32,500 to replace it again.
Sounds
can you
unusual.
explain that?
We'll try and get to the bottom of that. Mr. Old?
I would estimate that's probably a typo in the capital works program, but we'll clarify that for the budget agenda proper.
Right, so what I'll formally do is take that on notice so that it makes sure it goes its way into it. Sometimes, Mr. Maxwell, there can be occasions where we might describe something, we might put in the registration plate of the vehicle. That could be wrong, or there could be another item of the same type and we're replacing one and not the other. But we'll get to the bottom of that for you.
I mean, there are a number of them like that. I'm just wondering that there are amounts that are getting budgeted that may not be required, so that's going to reduce the requirement for the budget. If you know what I mean.
I certainly understand that. I'm very happy for you to let us know what they all are. You can either tell it to us now or you can send it through in a list. I'm sure Mr. Old will be more than happy to receive your email with the items identified, if that's the case. But I mean, I'm still working my way through the budget and comparing it to where we're at the end of June 2025. So I might come across the same things, but if you have those details ready and you want to tell us them,
I do have one. I've got another one here I can just give you now. It's in regards to hot water systems. There was 28 in the carry forwards for 84,500, 28 hot water systems. And there's in the May financials, there was an amount of 41,380 spent on 28 hot water systems. Now, they might be two different sets of hot water systems, but it just seems a bit odd that the same quantity are in there.
Mr. Old?
Mayor, I have to just take that on notice. Trying to just jump between the few attachments. It's just trying to track those through.
Yeah, look, I agree. When you're working from a very small screen on a laptop, it isn't exactly ideal. Perhaps we need to look at the next budget. We get you a really big screen so you can jump between screens, Mr. Old. How would that be? Mr. Maxwell, any other specific one that you want to point our attention to? We'll once again, though, take that one on notice with regards to the hot water systems. Noting we have a lot of them. I think they're in all of our clubhouses on all of our parks.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick statement. In regard to some of the capital works for roads, I mean, there's listed in the budget Whittleford Street, which has already been done from what I can see when I drive up there, and that project is listed in this year's budget. State Street, likewise. And I just wondered is this just paper shuffling, shifting money from one year to the other, or is these projects only half done and there's another half got to be done? It's just it just seems odd. The same roads are coming up and they've got substantial amounts of money on them, like Whittleford Street, I think it was 470,000 spent on it, and there's another 500,000 in the budget. So I don't know if that's the same amount repeated, or whether there's another substantial amount of money to be spent on the same project this year. So those are things. I've only had basically today to look at the budget, unlike yourselves who've had several meetings about it. It's only come out on Friday, so there's very little time to look into these things. So I'm just hoping the council and the staff go through it properly and take out what's not required.
Well, Mr. Maxwell, elected members have only seen the full version of the budget since it was published to the public last week. So we'll have seen portions of the budget in budget workshops, but seeing the whole thing put together, we get to see that at the same time it's released to the public. But your point is well made, but I will say there are some very long streets in the town, and we have in the past done renewals of those streets in sections, and sometimes we'll do parts of intersections and not other parts. So sometimes you might see evidence that portion of some of those streets have been renewed, but not the whole of it. So trust us, we'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb, make sure that there are no duplications. So thank you. Thank you for that. Since there are no other members of the public in attendance tonight, I'll close public participation time at 6:54 p.m. Item 8 on the agenda is presentations. We have none. Item 9 is deputations. There are none. Item 10 is the method of dealing with agenda business. As per our usual practice, we'll only focus on those items for which notification of questions have been given before we get started. I'm going to read the numbers now for the item numbers for which questions have been sent through. If there's an item that you wish to have added to the list, please do so at the end of me listing through them. If there's an item on there that you've asked questions about that you don't wish to pursue tonight because you've already received answers to your questions, please let us know and I'll check if any other elected members still wish that item to be included for questions. So first is 11.3 Advocacy Priority Projects 2025 to 26. 12.1 Revocation of Local Planning Policy 27 Building Height Controls. 12.2 Adoption of Local Planning Policy 39 Tree Retention and Local Planning Policy 45 Tree Planting for Non-Residential Development. 12.4 Endorsement to proceed to Stage 3 of the 40 km/h Safer Speeds Project. 14.3 Hubert Street Parking and Restriction Project. And 14.4 Adoption of the Annual Budget for 25-26. Are there any other items on the agenda that people would like to ask questions about that are not in that list? Any items in that list that people were keen to see taken off the list? Deputy Mayor Ife?
I no longer have my question about the budget. It's been answered, but there may be others. I'm sure there are.
I suspect there will be about the budget, so thank you for that. All right. So on that basis, we will get started with item 11.3. Which is the Advocacy Priority Projects questions. I have actually sent through some questions about this myself, which I don't think I've necessarily received any answers to, but that's not surprising because I sent those questions through quite late. My questions arise from my own notes that I took at our Advocacy Priorities workshop on the 22nd of April. Which lead me to ask the questions. I suppose, was it the case that staff recommended removal of the Burswood Station precinct and mid-tier transit during the workshop, which is what I recorded? And if so, why are they now included as part of the priority projects? I'll direct that question to the Acting CEO, Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. A final advocacy list was not developed at the Advocacy Priority Workshop, but a poll of the priorities was undertaken with elected members. Post the elected member workshop, the town's internal advocacy working group met to discuss the outcome and get feedback from that internal team. Advice from the town's subject matter experts following the workshop included that Taylor Reserve and McCallum was not at a point ready for advocacy as the master plan was being reviewed, and that the urban forest strategy was being sufficiently covered in advocacy work via our SECA regional group and our Perth Inner City Group regional alliance as well, and other priorities should be a focus. So to answer specifically about Burswood Station Precinct and the mid-tier transit project, because some projects were considered unsuitable, other projects were considered for inclusion, administration believes that a mid-tier transit connection to Curtin is at a point where it does require some advocacy. Further advocacy. Administration also sees the planning and development of the Burswood Station West Precinct and redevelopment of Burswood Station as worthy of advocacy, especially with the emerging potential impact of what is currently being planned on the peninsula currently, which is obviously now branded as the Perth Sporting and Entertainment Precinct.
All right, so I think in a roundabout way that answered questions necessarily that I didn't ask as well as questions I did ask. But I will go on to ask whether Rutland Avenue for the continuation of the final portion of the principal shared path and the urban forest strategy funding that was discussed at the workshop as being worthy of retention and advocacy. They're not now included. Is there a particular reason that we shouldn't be continuing our advocacy for both of those, Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. For Rutland Avenue, I've just sought some extra information. I will take that on notice. I wasn't at the advocacy workshop myself, so I'm going to take that one on notice. For the UFS, it's as per my explanation before, which is that it's administration's view that advocacy is sufficiently covered in our regional alliances with SECA and the Perth Inner City Group. What I would add, if you don't mind, is to say that Council can absolutely amend those proposed priorities from administration.
Thank you. That's all the questions that I want to ask tonight on this. Are there any other questions about this item from anyone? No? All right. We'll move on to 12.1, which is revocation of local planning policy 27, building height controls. Do you have any questions on this? All right, no questions on 12.1. 12.2 is adoption of local planning policy 39, tree retention, and local planning policy 45, tree planting for non-residential development. Questions in relation to this item? Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. Just seeking, I guess, clarification on the application of the policy in a situation. Particularly around, I guess, the definitions around the minor maintenance. So, I guess there is allowable. It is allowed under the policy to do maintenance pruning, but it needs to be, I guess, considered minor maintenance or thinning of the crown that does not adversely affect the health or general appearance of the tree, is what's in the policy. I just want to, I guess, clarify how that kind of interacts with the definitions under the tree damaging activity, which includes severing branches and limbs. So maybe just in an example, if you have a healthy tree and you would be doing maintenance on it, typically, you would sever a limb, or which would be considered, I guess, tree destructive, but it would also for some be considered minor maintenance in terms of just keeping the size of the tree contained, say, in the backyard. So do we have a feel about how a typical situation like that would play out?
I'm going to refer that question to Mr. Hobbs, Coordinator of Strategic Planning and Economic Development.
Thanks, Madam, through you. The definition of tree damaging activity is to capture the act of the activity. Under the policy's exemptions under clause 5D, it is exempt if the tree damaging activity is maintenance pruning, as you described. An earlier version of the policy developed by Walga had quite prescriptive detail around the extent to which that maintenance pruning would meet those definitions and require development approval. Examples of that were the width of the tree branch or the amount of the crown of the canopy that was being removed. But through discussions, both with internal staff and other local governments, it was considered that administering the policy that was so prescriptive was going to be challenging. So we opted to modify that policy to make it clear that most general maintenance or activity around a tree would be considered exempt, and it really does focus on the removal of trees or significant damage to the tree that would be requiring development approval. So that's the premise for that interpretation of the policy.
Thank you. And just another question. What would be the consequences for someone if they breached the policy?
Mr. Hobbs.
Through you, Melbourne. So under the Planning and Development Act, not obtaining development approval for works that you require development approval, we are able to prosecute and fine landowners who breach that. How the penalty is set is dependent on the degree of the breach that is happening and the circumstance. So not all trees being damaged would be met with the same penalty, and we are somewhat unsure as to how it will be treated by the State Administrative Tribunal or courts if and when we do prosecute people for breaches.
The maximum penalty under the Act, Councillor Minson, is $200,000, but it'd be fair to say from what Mr. Hobbs said that the maximum would be reserved for the most egregious type of offence.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. I've got some questions with regards to this matter. One of them is rather procedural that I did email through. It's in relation to how the officer recommendation in point 1 is crafted, given that it refers to adopting basically a modified LPP 39. However, given we already have an LPP 39 that is completely different to the one that's being proposed now, is it possible for us to consider, instead of using the words in point 1 of the recommendation, that we consider that we revoke the existing LPP 39 and we adopt the brand new one, presumably giving it a different number? Because if we don't do that, then on our website, when LPP 39 appears on the website after we've adopted it, assuming council does, anyone looking at it will see the date it was first adopted, which will bear the date of LPP 39 from 2020, will then show a series of amendments to it, but you won't be able to see what amendments were made because we don't show the versions on the website, we only show the current one. And that won't reflect the unusual history of this, it having been a interesting venture by the town in 2020 to creating a form of LPP around tree retention when there wasn't as much of a push for it as there has been in recent years. And of course, it won't reflect the fact that what we're proposing to adopt now that we've advertised is in fact based on the Walga template model that's been worked up to try and drive consistency across local governments. So in ordinary circumstances, if you just made amendments to LPP 39 as it currently exists and you only tweaked a couple of clauses, you could basically adopt a revised or amended or modified version of LPP 39, but actually we've got a whole different document that has a different sort of focus and a different framework in it. So I'm wondering if it's possible for us to do that recommendation number 1 in a different way than the way it's currently crafted, or Mr. Hobbs, do you see a problem with that?
Through you, Mayor, yep, there's absolutely no problem with adjusting the officer recommendation to be revoke and replace. Either recommendation will be similar for the implementation of the policies.
All right, thank you. I've got some other questions. Apologies that there's not necessarily any heads up notice, but I know that you're going to love these questions. The first of them is, based on the community consultation feedback, could we, as a council, consider reducing the height of the tree that would qualify as a significant tree for the purposes of tree damaging activity in this policy without needing to re-advertise? So I'm saying that on the basis that my assessment of all the submissions showed that almost 30% of all people who took the time to answer the question about whether they thought we'd got the size right indicated that they would be supportive of a lower height tree being recognised rather than 8 metres. Some went on to suggest 8 metres was very high and they'd like to see lower height trees protected as well. So I guess my question is, if we were to go below 8 metres as the starting point, would that require for a local planning policy us to re-advertise potentially or not? Mr. Hobbs.
Yes, Mayor. I think the size of the regulated tree being such a core component of the policy, any change to that would require re-advertising. I think it's also important to note, as you have earlier, that this is based on the WALGA template policy for all local governments. So the size of a regulated tree is consistent with what other local governments who have been pursuing this policy have adopted in those efforts. So any change from that, the council would need to consider what that may mean for the purpose of the WALGA policy and consistency across local governments.
All right, so leaving aside the question about consistency with the WALGA template, if council were considering reducing the 8 metres to 7 metres, would that, in your view, be something that would automatically need to go out to be re-advertised?
I would think any change to the definition of a regulated tree, given it is the core component of the policy, should probably be publicly advertised.
So is it your view that that's the case, notwithstanding that we asked people the principal question, do you support us protecting trees in this way, subject to this policy? That was a core question in my view, because that is the core intent of the policy, is that we have a local planning policy that regulates what you can and can't do with the tree on private land. And we asked people for their support of that, and as your officer report indicates, there was overwhelming support for that to be the case. And yes, we set in the draft policy a particular height, and we did ask people if they had views about that, and all those who didn't like the policy idea at all, clearly not going to change their mind whether it's a 8-metre high tree or a 3-metre high tree, and all those who supported the policy, some of them went so far as to say they would have supported even greater expansion of protection to lower height trees. So is it still your view, in light of the results that we got, that we would need to fundamentally be re-advertising that?
Yes, Mayor, I do believe so. While we did ask the question as to people's perspective as whether they supported the height that we proposed or a lower height, I think for the reasons I stated before, the work that has gone into deciding on this as a starting point, the change to that is just representing a significant change to the policy, so it would need to be re-advertised.
All right, thank you. My next question is, I had a look at the other local governments who've already adopted this policy based on the Walga template, and 3 of them have advertised a development application fee of $147. Do you know what, if any, amount the town is proposing to charge by way of a development application fee for a person who would be applying under this policy for permission to remove or undertake a tree damaging activity? Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, the minimum development application fee, I believe, is $147, and that would be for, if that was the standalone application without any other value of works with it, would I imagine be the fee we would charge.
So my next question is, would it be open to council, assuming we're prepared to adopt this policy at the ordinary council meeting, for us to consider that for at least the first 12 months, we would like to see that fee waived in order to not be a barrier to people to apply for their approval under the policy? Is that a possibility, Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, that is possible, I believe. Whether it would need to be stated in fees and charges.
More than happy to hear from Mr. Cruikshank or Mr. Doy, because I know that obviously we've got a development application fee and the fees and charges, but if that fee's to be waived, I don't know how it works from an administrative perspective, but I know that if council were to resolve that it was to be waived for a period of time, that would alleviate the need for the town staff to wonder about that. I'm kind of asking if that's a possibility. Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm thinking on the run. I suspect it is a possibility, but it would be good in this instance to take that on notice and find the right answer.
All right, so we'll take that one on notice. My next question is, would it be open to us as part of this local planning policy for us to fix a time frame for regular review, given we're going to be really keen to see what level this policy gets used, what level we think it's not being utilised, and of course the world of tree protection is changing on a very regular basis, and the need is currently growing exponentially greater rather than shrinking. So could this be a policy that we could decide as part of it to review on an annual basis? Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, Mayor, the council certainly could add to the resolution to bring a report back monitoring the effect and application of the policy.
All right, thank you. My next question relates to, in the policy itself, where it defines tree damaging activity. I did note from one of the comments that was made that we should consider including damage to the tree's roots. And I know that roots are not one of the things mentioned where we actually talk about damage to the tree. We talk about the stem and the trunk, the leaves, branches, etc. But is it your view that we don't need to include reference to the roots because they're covered by that final catch-all, any other substantial damage to the tree? Or is it worthwhile including roots in the same place where we talk about stems, trunks, branches, etc.? Mr. Hobbs.
I I think it could be captured in the final catch or any other substantial damage to a tree, but to provide greater clarity, if that is a particular aspect of a tree that we are wishing to include in tree damaging activity, I don't see any harm in adding roots as a descriptor.
I'm taking it that wouldn't be requiring something like re-advertising, Mr. Hobbs?
Not for that matter, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And finally, there were a number of people who made comments in the community consultation who talked about focusing on, I'll call it for want of a better expression, a minimum mature canopy size as part of the criteria. I don't quite know how that works, given that we've said the height is to be 8 metres and canopy is 6 metres. And I think this relates to some other people who talked about the age of trees, but I'm wondering if once you saw the community consultation comments, you have any views about whether what we're proposing in this policy needs to perhaps be augmented either by adding the criteria related to the age of a tree or a minimum mature canopy size, other than what we've already got. Mr. Hobbs.
Yes, Mayor. I think the average canopy diameter of at least 6 metres captures the canopy component sufficiently. Age of tree is chosen not to be included in a regulated tree for numerous reasons. One obviously being that the older a tree, the sooner it would be to its end of life potentially, and that then coming into consideration for some of the other exemptions of the policy around tree health and safety and those types of considerations. Generally, age of tree is considered potentially under a significant tree register, which is something that the town at this stage has chosen not to pursue formalising with the planning framework. That draft policy did have age as a consideration, but we wouldn't consider it appropriate for regulating trees more broadly.
Okay, thank you. I did have two other questions. One was in relation to when I reviewed the policies that have been adopted by some of the other local governments, which are relatively few in number at the moment, but all based on the Walga template, was only one, the town of Cambridge, who actually chose the circumference of the tree trunk to be 1 metre, not the 1.5 metres that's in the Walga policy that everyone else seems to have adopted. And I've been giving a lot of thought to this about 1 metre and 1.5 metre diameter for a trunk. It's quite big. Is it, in your view, open to council to consider the trunk diameter being 1 metre as the minimum rather than the 1.5 metres? Mr. Hobbs?
It is within council's remit to potentially modify that, but similar to the discussion around either height or canopy, I do think these are key components or the core component of the policy. Given that it is or for each of the criteria, 8 metres or high, 6 metres or diameter, or the trunk circumference, it would need to be a tree, obviously, with a 1 metre circumference that is not 8 metres high or having a canopy of 6 metres for that to be the trigger for it to become a regulated tree. I would imagine that would be quite a rare occasion for trees. So in my view, it would be best to keep it consistent, but it's certainly something that could be modified. It's just I would still recommend that if we were to do that, it would probably be something we would consider re-advertising.
All right, thank you. And this last one is probably a bit of a technical question, but if assuming council adopts the policy for the tree retention, will it be possible for members of the public who want to have a look on the town's intramaps at the tree on their own property to determine if it's caught by this policy? Is that a functionality that we have available to us, given that the town of Cambridge's website indicates that they have tree canopy height data provided by Arbor Carbon? on the town's intramaps and to see if your particular tree has been identified as 8 metres or more, you can turn on the tree canopy 8 metres and above layer and it shows whether your tree is caught by the policy. Feels like a handy little thing to have, and I'm just curious if we've got that capacity. Either Mr. Hobbs or Mr. Doy.
Yes, this is something we have considered. The town does currently have similar canopy capturing mapping facilities. It's not calibrated to the dimensions of the policy at the moment, but it is something that we can pursue with Avocaba to make that feature available to more accurately show it.
Okay, so hard question. Do you think that's likely to be something to be very expensive for us to acquire the capacity to do that, or is that just not known to us at this stage? Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, I'd have to take that on notice in regards to the cost, but I imagine it's hopefully less expensive given its tweaking of the parameters of the data we already capture rather than capturing new data.
Well, in that case, I will ask for that to be taken on notice because I am concerned if that is a good functionality that we could offer to the community to make it easy for them and it turns out to have a significant cost to it that we're not currently budgeting for, be worthwhile knowing that because having that available as soon as the policy were to be adopted, I think would be quite useful for people because then they would understand whether they're caught by the policy or not. Thank you. So we take that question on notice. Thank you. I could ask many more questions, but I won't. Anybody else with other questions on this one? Councillor Melrosa.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. This question's about point 10 of the report where we consider an unwanted tree species list if we are to adopt LPP 39. The first point in the list is for all palm tree species to be included on the list. My question is, has the town considered not including Phoenix canariensis and Washingtonia robusta on the list as palms, given that these two palms are typically found on either character properties of the town. In one case, the state heritage listed Elizabeth Bailey House has Washington robusta, so does Raphael Park have Washington robusta. I think Kent Street Senior High School has Phoenix canariensis, or is that how you pronounce it? So I think we find them in quite old places that have a little bit of history, so I'd be worried that we would just be allowing these trees to just be removed without any consideration for the amenity benefits and heritage benefits that these trees might bring.
Mr. Hobbs?
Thanks for you, Mayor Vernon. The list of unwanted tree species was developed a combination in consultation with the town's internal landscape architect and urban forest team as to species that were considered basically to offer minimal either canopy coverage or environmental value and therefore likely to be endorsed for removal under a development application. It was seen to be an opportunity to avoid the need for a development application if it was very likely that the town was going to approve their removal. But those considerations were made without the points you just made, Councillor Melrosa, around any character or heritage considerations for those species of trees.
Councillor Melrosa, anything further?
And maybe similarly for the frangipani tree as well, acknowledging it doesn't provide too much canopy, but again we find those trees in areas of quite old age, and I think generally the public see them to be quite attractive trees, so another amenity value probably associated with that species as well.
Is that a question, Councillor Melrosa, or it sounded a little bit like a statement? Are you actually asking the question of whether the unwanted tree species list could be amended?
Correct, I am.
In relation to both the palm tree species and the frangipani species to tease out a particular type of them that that, if I'm understanding you correctly, would then mean they become a species that does require development application, because the unwanted tree species list clearly says development approval will not be required to remove any of the unwanted species. You could just go ahead and do it. So you're asking, could it be amended to put certain species or
Take them off
clarify
the
that
list,
certain
basically.
species not to be included, which would then mean they would need a development application? Got that
Correct.
question, Mr.
Thank you.
Hobbs? Yes.
Absolutely. Whatever tree species are added to an unwanted tree species list is adopted by the council is a decision of the council. It's just the mechanics of the policy allows us to adopt that list if there were any trees we wish to confirm they were unwanted species and exempt from the policy.
Right. So would that mean that the way to achieve what Councillor Melrose just referred to would be to say, where it says palm tree and it says bracket all species, you would add in the words except for and then name the particular species, meaning that they're palm species to not be included, therefore they do require development application. That be right?
Yes, correct. So we could specify the species within the list appropriately.
Is that also doable for frangipani? Because I only know frangipani to come in white, pink, and maybe yellow. That's how I know my frangipanis, sorry. It's how they smell. It's pretty. Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, the same principle applies.
All right, okay, fair enough. Anything further, Councillor Melrose? No. I do have a quick question about the unwanted tree species list now that Councillor Melrose has made this point. Because this is said that we'll adopt this as an addendum to the policy, does that mean over time, if there's a need to add more species to it or potentially take a species off it, will that require this document to be advertised? That's the first sub-point. And the second point is, even if it doesn't require it to be advertised, will it require it to come to council every time it needs to be changed? Because you're putting it to us to adopt it now. Mr. Hobbs?
That's an excellent question. The administration of the unwanted tree species list is tied to the policy. It's intended to essentially be an appendice to the policy. So in theory, yes, that would require council resolution to modify it. However, as far as whether we would need to advertise that, under the planning regulations, we do have the ability to decide not to amend a policy for what we consider an administrative change or a change that doesn't materially impact the policy. So defining a species more specifically, we may consider to be within that remit.
All right, thank you. So would that mean if we did decide to impose a regular time frame for policy review for this policy, say at the 12-month mark, that would give an appropriate opportunity to revise the unwanted tree species list, and if it's needed to be amended at that stage, that could happen then quite regularly if we needed to. Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, correct. That could be done then.
Thank you. Any other questions about this? Councillor Cruiser.
Thank you. Yes. I also wanted to ask for just a little bit more information about the unwanted tree species list, given that there are quite a few trees that grow locally that do act as reproductive hosts for polyphagous short-hole borer. Was the reason for not including them because they have other environmental or social benefits?
Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Yes, that was generally, there was a review of a list put out by, I think it was both DPIRD and Watercorp have unwanted species and guidance on these things. But we, for the intent of this policy, because it's mostly around protecting tree canopy, some of the tree species that would come up on the breeder of the short-hole borer list or may cause footpath damage or other reasons that you might not plant a tree in certain scenarios, we still didn't want to see those trees exempt from being removed on that basis.
Anything further about this item? No? All right. We'll go to 12.4, endorsement to proceed to stage 3 of the 40-kilometre Safer Speeds project. Councillor Cruiser, I understand you had a question about this.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, in the schedule of submissions on 12.2.4, we're given qualitative responses from people who had concerns about the project or who also were concerned about the thought of going down to a lower speed limit in some areas. And we were given snippets of their qualitative feedback and their comments. We didn't receive the same quality of feedback from people who support the project. So I've had members of the community come and say, I wrote quite a long response. We didn't receive, that wasn't included here. Is there a justification for why only the more negative comments were included?
Direct that question to the acting CEO, Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I don't know about justification. I guess the intent of the report writer was to demonstrate the nuance and diversity of comments from those not supportive, in the fact that it wasn't necessarily a vote of non-support. It was a vote of non-support in some instances with also support for some areas. And so if, I don't support but, or I don't support it in these areas, but I would support it in these areas. And so the intent of the report was to try and tease out some of that detail. My understanding was that some of the qualitative responses some of the survey responses from those that did support do make their way into attachment 1 as well. Although I do take your point that the titles within attachment 1 do show a lot of comments from those that do not support.
There have been requests from people in the community that their survey responses are made available to elected members. Is it possible for us to get some kind of a selection of some of the survey responses on all sides in response to this project?
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I do believe we have done that in the past, making sure that obviously names are redacted from the attachment. So I'll take that on notice and just get an understanding as to whether that can be provided as an additional attachment to the report.
Any other questions about 12.4? Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Mayor. On the similar kind of topic, on the subjects and the questions asked, is there a question, or is there a way, I guess, of determining, a more simple yes or no? Do you support the 40 km/h across the the implementation of the project or not? Because I guess a lot of the questions are kind of worded as slightly different than that, just straight up and down.
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, I do take your point. Reading through attachment 1, there are a lot of additional questions that don't seem to necessarily just ask the straight flat out question of do you support 40 kilometres on a local road. So there is a way of asking that question, which is to ask that question. And from what I can see in the community survey, it sort of beats around it a little bit rather than ask that question. So I might just take it on notice as well, just to understand the exact intent and whether I've missed something in these survey responses after looking at attachment 1.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll take that on notice, Mr. Doy. That's what you're happy to do. We'll take that on notice. Anything further, Councillor Minson? No. Anyone else with questions on this item? I've got a couple of questions that I sent through. So the first one is, what is the time frame for each of the stage 3 implementation phases that are outlined in paragraph 18 of the officer's report? Direct that question to you, Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Timing for all of the stage 3 activities is still being determined, so coordinating across 5 LGAs is quite an endeavour. However, it is anticipated that all of the activities that are listed in the report for stage 3 activities including detailed design and subsequent main roads approval, would be completed by the end of 2025-26, the end of next financial year, ready for installation to commence in 2026-27. But this is rough timing and subject to change. We may be ready to commence earlier. It's worth noting that with that though, Road Safety Commission funding, which we're obviously dependent on, is likely to be for multiple years if we can successfully obtain it.
Thank you. My next question is, in the officer report under the heading Financial Implications, why does it state that sufficient funds exist within the current budget to address this recommendation, meaning the one in the officer recommendation, yet the future budget impact actually indicates that external funding will be what will be sought to address the recommendation, and if that's not available, then council may have to fund it? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. The recommendation relates to stage 3 activities, as listed in the report, of which at the time of writing and agenda publishing, there was no direct cost anticipated, and that's still the case, anticipated to the town. So therefore, there is no funds necessary in the current budget. Installation of the signs and lines by Main Roads WA is where the major cost will be, and is dependent on Road Safety Commission funding. And as I sort of said before, it is expected that installation, and therefore the cost to undertake that installation, is likely to be in 2026-27.
Thank you. My next question is, if the external funding were not available, will the town be able to fund the costs of the stage 3 implementation internally? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. With regard to the installation of sign and line marking, if the Road Safety Commission decided not to fund this project, and if the cost to install could not be met via some other external funding opportunity, then administration may consider recommending to council to fund the implementation itself. However, this would need to be presented to council as a report and allow council to consider and debate that proposal in the normal manner.
Thank you. What is the estimated cost of implementation if the town were to have to fund it, noting that that would obviously be an estimate as at today's value, not necessarily what it might be if it takes another year or more? Mr. Doy.
Yes, if the town were to fund the installation of the necessary signs and lines in the town of Vic Park, the estimated cost is $600,000. Now that $600,000 is if we proceed at the same time as the other Perth inner city group local governments, because there are cost efficiencies in going together. If we were to delay or go at a time that wasn't with the other Perth inner city group local governments, that cost would expand to about $950,000.
All right, thank you. And if it has to be funded internally, what impact would that likely have on the timing of the proposed implementation of stage 3? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. We don't see why it would have any impact on timing.
All right, thank you. Any other questions about this item? No? All right, so I'll move on to 14.3, which is Hubert Street Parking and Restriction Project. I did have some questions about this, but does anyone else have questions about this item? No, I'm not seeing any indicated. All right, so my questions are, what section of Hubert Street do the original 6 residents live on who lodged the November 2024 email complaint? Because I'm trying to get a handle on where on that road actually 6 people indicated there was an issue. So if I could refer that question, please, to who's doing the Hubert Street. Mr. Pryor.
Sorry. I'm under the understanding that from the main petitioner that's suggested it, they're all towards Miller and Hubert Street end, the closest end to Miller Street.
All right, so when you said main petitioner, obviously the report refers to the fact that there was an email on behalf of 6 people and then there was a separate petition. So when you say petitioner, you are talking about the person who sent the email on behalf of the 6?
Yes.
All right, that's fine. Could you outline what safety and driveway obstruction concerns were raised in that initial complaint back in November 2024?
Yep, so that original email highlighted issues about people parking right on the corner closest to Hubert and Miller Street. So as people would come around the corner, they'd be too close. Parking on both sides of Hubert Street, making it only one way access between those vehicles, and also parking across or encroachment on crossovers, and then they shared they said impossible to get out of their driveway when they are encroached over their crossovers or their driveways. The letters also address that they sort of wish to see the parking be prohibited to one side of Hubert Street, and then plus installing non-stopping markers at least 2 metres on both sides of each crossovers to avoid that overlap. So that was all taken in the earlier phases.
All right, thank you. In paragraphs 4 and 5 of the report, the officers indicate that they sent emails to that original group of 6 residents. Were any responses received from any of them to the town's emails about the progress of this, Mr. Pryor?
I'll need to take this part on notice. I'll just need to check in with the responsible officer.
All right, we'll take that on notice. My next question is the plan that is referred to in paragraph 6 of the officer's report the same as attachment 14.3.4, Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
All right, thank you. My next question is, was attachment 14.3.4 what was presented as part of the community consultation for people to comment on, Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
Next question, what was the reason given by the petitioners, so these are the people who had the 40 signatures, who were seeking the proposal to be abandoned? So that was the petition that came in on the 7th of April. Mr. Pryor?
Yep, so looking back on it, the petitioners seeked to abandon the, and this is a bit of a quotation as well because I didn't want to mislead anyone, but abandon the current proposal to change parking restrictions along the length of Hubert Street between Miller and Mint Street, and look to other alternatives in consultation with the residents in this section of the street. These alternatives should discourage non-residents from parking in or driving through this section of Hubert Street for the following reasons. The current proposal will increase both the speed and volume of traffic down the length of a suburban street. Removal of 33 parking spaces will disadvantage multiple dwellings and rear dwellings who require on-street parking for themselves and visitors. Other alternatives might include better optimizing lights at Miller Street and Mint Street Road, remove parking on both sides at Miller Street end, residents only parking restrictions during peak periods, and raise intersections, partial closure of Miller Street entry or exit only. So that was just quoting straight out of that petition.
Thank you, and that's what I wanted to know because I couldn't quite put my hands on the petition. My next question is, if the community consultation questions, feedback and full results can actually be provided to elected members, because I'm trying to ascertain why over 80% of the people on this street oppose the proposed restrictions, other than what is referred to in the report as merely being expected speeding that would occur. Is that possible to provide that information, Mr. Pryor?
Yes, we would also look to redact those names and addresses out of it and just provide the pure commentary around that, yes.
Providing it in the usual way that we would know to see it. Yes,
correct.
Thank you. My next question is, did community consultation include support for any part of the officer's proposed plan, for example, updating the line marking with the no parking areas to prevent people parking and obstructing driveway access, or were the questions not specific enough that they drilled down into the various aspects of the officer's proposed plan? Mr. Pryor?
I'll need to take this one notice because there was a mixture of survey results and emails, so I'll take that on notice.
Right, we can take that on notice. That would be great. My next question is, in light of the 2024 complaint and the 2025 petition, Is there a reason why an updated traffic survey was not conducted as part of the analysis, given that the last one, according to the report, was done in June 2022? Mr. Pryor?
I'm just going to read out what was being suggested. So whilst the information is outdated in the section currently under investigation, a good gauge is to use data from the section of Hubert Street to the south Mint Street and Dane Street, which is from April 2024. Operating speeds along Hubert Street is higher importance in this section, Miller Street to Mint Street. Given the safety concerns, a new count can be requested prior to any line marking and signage changes.
Thank you. My next question, was consideration given to holding a meeting with local residents given the strong outcome of the community consultation and the very different view taken by the town staff? Mr. Pryor?
No, there was not a decision to hold an on-site meeting. Residents living along Hubert Street received correspondence in relation to the community consultation. The survey was also still available to the broader people in the area that might have come across it on our website or the Your Thoughts page. It says, as mentioned in the report, Hubert Street runs parallel with Albany Highway and is likely generating more than just local traffic from residents. So the discussion today that maybe a broader consultation would have a different perspective, because there's a lot of people using it for a through roads, not just those people that are living in that area. So, but yeah, no on-site meeting has been held with them.
All right. And as per paragraph 24 of the officer's report, is it the case that the staff could simply proceed with the line marking that they've suggested without needing to be recommending that to council? Because it is written as a recommendation, but noting it's not in the formal officer recommendation. Mr. Pryor?
Yes, this would be covered under the regulatory legislation, the road traffic codes. However, due to the ongoing contention between some of the residents and staff, we believed it was fit to proceed with bringing this recommendation to council to understand the potential implications.
All right. You'll be delighted to know that your answers have provoked more questions from me. In the discussion part of the officer report, there's only reference in 2 paragraphs 11 and 12 to the outcome of the community consultation. And as you noted, the community consultation was open to anyone, not just people who resided on that street. So of the 64 responses, how many of those people were from Hubert Street and how many of them were outside of Hubert Street? Or is that something you need to take on notice at this stage, Mr. Pryor?
I'll need to take that on notice.
All right, thank you. In relation to the answers that you did provide, when you indicated what the petitioners, the 40 who signed asking for the proposal of the town staff to be abandoned, they mentioned some alternatives, and I am wondering why some of those alternatives weren't considered by the town staff, in the sense that they're not referred to in the officer's report. So I'm now talking about the option or the alternative suggested by the community of just removing the parking on both sides of Hubert Street, just at the Miller Street end. And you did indicate to me in an earlier answer that it was residents at the Miller Street Hubert intersection had the biggest problem. There was also reference by the petition people to having parking restrictions during peak periods that might assist with improving the safety on that road. And obviously noting that some of their suggestions about the optimisation of traffic lights at Miller Shepparton Road is something the town is working on anyway, and also a raised intersection partial closure of Miller Street. Not sure if that's been considered entry or exit only as well. Mr. Pryor, any idea why those matters, if they were considered, they're not in the report, or were they not considered at all?
I'll need to take probably it on notice because there's a few elements there, but mainly the focus was allowing cars to safely travel down that street because of those concerns. So it is quite a narrow street already. When we do have vehicles parked either side, it does really limit it to the minimum of about 3.4 metres. That's if everyone's sitting right up against the edges. So the main factor around safety and making sure we've got safe roads and those crossovers were not encroached was the main goal, and that's why they've was the recommendation of parking along one side, then transitioning across, and then parking on the other side, so vehicles can safely travel through. However, did they consider those other options of entries and exits? I'll need to take that on notice.
Thank you. Quite some time ago, in fact, quite a few years ago, when we had the Lathlane Traffic Management Plan still in operation, I recall then that being advised by the town that there needed to be at least 50% or more of the people who lived on a particular street reach agreement if there were to be any traffic calming measures or anything like that that might slow down traffic. I also remember years ago there were people on State Street who wanted there to be changes made with regards to parking, and they petitioned the council, and then almost an approximately similar group of people from the same street petitioned council for the exact opposite, and it appeared the residents on that very long State Street couldn't agree with each other as to what was best for their street, as a result of which the town staff held some meetings to try and broker some way through that impasse. Is it the case that we do pay attention if the majority of people who live on a street don't want a particular proposal that the town is suggesting, or not? Mr. Pryor.
Cool. Thank you. And that is absolutely the case when we're considering time parking restrictions and our intervention from our parking management plan. When it comes around to safety, our teams really lean against the road traffic codes and what is legislation and what is required to happen in that space. When it comes to so therefore the consultation around preferences was a little bit misleading. It probably should have been more of an informed process if we've only got one plan and this is purely the best plan from safety. Whereas if there was two options, that would have given them choice, and that's probably where that 50% or above could have been more effective. But when it comes down to safety, we take a different approach, and this is our recommendation from our street improvement team.
Thank you. So did the administration do any modelling as to what is expected to happen to all the people that park on Hubert Street currently, noting its proximity to Albany Highway, in addition to obviously residents, if suddenly one side of the street has no parking on it, where all those cars might end up going? Mr. Pryor?
I'll need to take that on notice.
If we can take that on notice, please. Thank you. Any other questions about this particular item? Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, similar questions, I guess, on the nature of the opposition to the proposal. Does the town have, I guess, an opinion or a feel for whether that opposition, the justifications for the opposition and the reasonings given are addressed, I guess, by kind of the ancillary projects, particularly the Hubert and Mint Street raised plateau project and the proposed upgrade to the Mint and Shepparton, I guess, addressing concerns there, and then also the town's proposal to, I guess, look at traffic calming measures post proposal implementation. If those, I guess, three ancillary bits of work address much of the opposition or a majority of the opposition? Mr.
Pryor?
Unfortunately, I'm probably not the best one to answer because my oversight of all those projects who currently isn't strong. So I'd probably have to take that on notice and speak to the street improvement team around how that would play out.
I was going to say we could take it on notice, but Ms Adams is very eager, I think, to add something to the mix. Is that right, Ms Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if I'm eager, but I would say that, so the ones you're referencing is in paragraphs 21 and 22, but the main reasons are contained within paragraph 16. So while the speed will be mitigated by those measures, the primary reason, which is it's just reducing the congestion, the possibility of side swiping, and just providing a bit of, I suppose, availability for things like emergency vehicles and things to be able to access with a minimum 5.4 metre clearance is more the concern.
All right.
Thank you. Could
I was going to say, Councillor Minson, did you still want further taken on notice to the answer to that question as Mr Pryor had indicated, or are you satisfied with Ms Adams's answer?
I'd clarify. I guess I understand. Yeah, the paragraph 16 addressing the reasons that we're undertaking this proposal as scoped here. I guess I'm after the nature of the residents' opposition. That a lot of the opposition that I've come across through feedback is, we haven't addressed these other concerns, not necessarily the side swiping or the things like that. So I guess I'm after the whether their concerns, while it may not be addressed by this scope of work under this item, are addressed by those other projects. And therefore, if they had the full picture of what the town's doing, that they wouldn't be so strongly opposed.
Might not be possible for us to know what's in the mind of third parties, but obviously we haven't actually seen the community consultation details, so we don't know what questions were asked of them or what free-form feedback they might have had an opportunity to provide. So I'm a bit wary of taking that question on notice, Councillor Minson, because Mr Pryor, unless you say, yes, I can easily answer that, I'm not sure how it can be answered by us. Mr Pryor?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't really have much more to add to it in relation to those bigger programs. Again, the community consultation, what's happened right now is what's happened. Unless we were going to go back out to community consultation and try to take a different approach, different workshops, yeah, I'm just not too sure.
The acting CEO would like to weigh in. Mr Doy.
It's a brave move. Thanks, Mayor Vernon. If the inference from residents on Hubert Street is their concerns are around their Mint Hubert Street intersection and I don't know what the specific concerns are, but if they are concerns around safety to do with the intersection, then we can absolutely infer that the works that are being undertaken at Mint Hubert Street will create a slower and then therefore safer environment for vehicles, but also for cyclists and pedestrians. That's the whole point of those projects.
Councillor Minson.
Thank you. I just said I'll be satisfied. I think reading through the qualitative kind of feedback from the survey, make that judgment.
Just a final question, Mr Pryor. Were council to be of the view that there ought to be another interaction with the residents on Hubert Street, particularly since they're the ones most directly affected by the town's proposed plan, is that something that is possible to be achieved before council were to make a decision on this? Mr Pryor?
I'd probably need to understand a bit more from the street improvements what type of engagement is best. It would be around a more educational inform around the decision, because from my understanding, this is the only plan that has been proposed and developed. If there was another alternative or other things that could be worked into it, we would probably then seek to do further engagement and a further community consultation period. But yeah, right now on this plan that's been presented, I would do a more of an inform session around why these interventions have been preferred over others.
All right, thank you. Any other final questions about 14.3? No? All right, final item, 14.4, which is the adoption of the budget. Deputy Mayor Ife, I think you said you didn't want to ask your question about the budget anymore.
No, I'm quite content with the answer I received. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, I have you on the list of questions about the budget.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just one question. Under reserves in the report, there's mention of the Ken Street Sandpit Bushland Management Project and funds being allocated to it. I just wanted to clarify, which I did receive an email, but I'd just like to have it on public record as well, a response that the primary perimeter paths and the secondary connecting pathways are also being designed with universal principles. It does mention the universal accessibility ramps. I just wanted to clarify that as going forward in the budget.
Direct that question to Mr. Old, or... Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Would have been a collaboration with Matt's team anyway. So, in addition, the concept plan includes a primary perimeter path and secondary connecting path are formalised. So there was a slight typo, I think, in the agenda item. Car park and universal accessible ramps. Please note all the paths within the Kent Street Sandpit will be universally accessible.
Is that it, Councillor Anderson?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Minson.
Thank you. Yes, I had a couple of questions. What are the town's recommended changes to the proposed budget if differential rates were modified to levy a 4% increase in rate revenue instead of a 5%?
Mr. Old?
Sorry, Mayor, I just missed some of the question there. I heard 4% and 5%, but I...
Yeah, Councillor Minson, you want to ask ask your question again, please?
Yep. So what are the town's recommended changes to the proposed budget if differential rates were modified to levy a 4% increase in rate revenue instead of 5%?
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies. It was on the next page and I failed to scroll down. So, per paragraph 14 and discussion at the budget workshops, the difference between 4% and 5% estimated at $533,891 will be allocated to the future project reserve. So any reductions back to 4%, the difference will be taken off the proposed allocation to that reserve.
Thank you. And the next question, does the proposed operating budget allow for the recommended bidder's tendered cost for the short-term food organic garden organic waste processing contract under the tender TVP 2511, which is in today's agenda?
Mr. Old?
Thank you, Mayor. So allowance has been made in the budget for FOGO processing. We put the budget prior to issuing that tender, so not necessarily specifically the amount mentioned in that item, in that confidential item. However, with the introduction of both FOGO and Verge Valet service, the total cost of waste services is estimated to increase by $1.6 to $1.7 million. But there is a degree of uncertainty, which we've highlighted to Council before, depending on pick-up rates and take-up rates and when the FOGO program may reach its full maturity. So this does depend on the implementation and overall take-up of these services. But in short, we have an allowance for FOGO processing.
And just to clarify that answer, so and the allowance that we have made for FOGO processing, is that adequate when compared to that the tender that's confidential but attached to tonight's agenda?
Mr. Old?
My modelling, yes.
Thank you.
All right. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, with regards to the presentation of the budget to Council, we've had this in the past. For many years, we received the statutory budget. We also received the operating budget as well as the CapEx budget. We have had a year in the past where we didn't receive the operating budget. But is there a reason why the operating budget is not included? Noting, of course, what is required to go in the statutory budget. So I'll just go to the first question about, is there a reason why the operating budget is not included for us to review and adopt? Mr. Old.
Thank you, Mayor, for your question. Yes. So, as Council will be aware, we spent a lot of time on the review and the ranking of the capital works program, in particular this year. So, as an administration, we spent a little bit more of our proportion of our time on that. Secondly, we have also revised and completely redone our general ledger structure. So, the correlation and collection of the information, while accurate, was very difficult to be able to produce a team report, if that makes sense, or by management group. Next year, if the reporting software which we plan is in place, that should be substantially easier. But we just didn't have the capacity to do it in a neat, presentable way.
So, Mr. Auld, then how is it that elected members will be able to exercise their role for good governance and oversight without being able to see the operating budget?
As I recall, at the last budget workshop, the team summary budgets were circulated to elected members at the categories employment costs, materials and contracts, and so on. So that was circulated, whatever that was, 2 or 3 weeks ago, to elected members.
I understand that. However, that's not part of the budget documentation provided to Council for us to adopt formally. So, if that information was available to be circulated around at workshops, is that not information that can be presented as an addendum to assist with this budget? Mr. Auld?
I have to take that on notice, just to think through that. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Just as a information point, that is how we've received information in the past, in an almost identical manner, which does show, for example, increases in employee positions and the like, which at the moment are otherwise unable to be readily determined from looking at the statutory budget. The next question I have is that in relation to this budget, it proposes that there's a new loan of $2.2 million for Elizabeth Bailey Park. Am I not correct in thinking that we've approved that new loan to be taken out in previous budget years? Is it just that we've never taken it out, even though it's been stated before? Because otherwise it looks like every budget we're applying for a new loan for the same project of a similar amount, which some people might interpret that we keep loaning the same amount of money year in, year out. Mr. Auld.
Mayor, you are correct. It's just compliant from a statutory point of view that while you can take out a loan mid-budget or mid-year, it's easier to put it through the budget process. It's all clear, but you are correct. This is the one and only loan that I think has been on the books for 2 or 3 years now, from recollection.
All right, thank you. In relation to 14.4.1, so the statutory budget document itself, I just want to ask a question, if you can clarify for me, the anticipated revenue that the town will receive from the imposition of interest payments and late payment fees for those who end up paying by instalments. I think hope I've read it correctly, where it appears as revenue, but if I could just get you to please confirm which one it is. Mr. Auld.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I get some of the details, I'll refer to my brains trust over there. But on page 19, that may give the clarity that you're after. So this is note 9. There is $3.9 million worth of interest shown there, and that has got the breakdown of what that is made up of. So reserve, late payment of fees and charges. Is that, just clarifying, that's where the interest on overdue rates is tabled? Yeah.
Yeah, so I am obviously looking at the fact that we both charge people an interest rate who choose to pay by instalments, and then we also charge people a late payment fee, which is completely different. That's if they fail to pay on time. So I'm wanting to be really clear about what is the extent of the revenue the town says it expects to receive from us charging these fees to people who choose to pay both by instalment and then separately the late payment? Because I know that late payment is just an estimate based on whatever happened in the year before, that we might expect to see the same volume of people who are late, and therefore they're going to get penalised. Mr. Pryor, did you want to take that one? Mr. Pryor.
We would need to take that on notice to get further clarification from our rates team, and then seek that clarification.
All right, thank you. Is it likely that the other interest revenue in 9A that's set to be 440,000, would that include this issue of interest on instalment payments, as well as potentially other forms of interest revenue? Either Mr. Pryor or Ms. McIntosh.
Thank you, Mayor. The other interest revenue is indeed from the installment payment, and then that late payment of fees and charges is other interest revenue is the interim and late payment from the rates, and late payments of the fees and charges is related to purely for the fees and charges.
Okay, thank you. So it leads to my question. In 2020, during COVID, to assist people in what was a financially difficult and precarious time, we actually reduced the percentage that we charged for interest for those choosing to pay by instalments for their rates. Is that an option for us to consider, given the considerable cost of living that's been compounding over the last couple of years, to look at reducing the percentage rate at which we charge people interest if they choose to pay by instalments? Mr. Old?
Clearly, Council adopt the budget so they can adopt what they wish. So in the actual resolution, or recommendation I should say, because it has not been resolved just yet, the second point has the various interest rates and charges. So that could be amended or changed, obviously subject to whatever council may wish to do. Also, just make the point that under note 2, under rate and service charges, there is actually on page 7, there is a further breakdown of instalment plan charges, interest and late payment as well. So that to answer your further question, so the maximum that you can charge on interest on various categories is set in the legislation. You can charge less to that maximum if you so wish. From recollection, I think the maximum is 11% for penalty, and we're recommending 8. So at the moment, we're not for the bad defaulters, but obviously it's council's decision what they wish to do.
All right, thank you. My next question, again, is back on 14.4.1, and this relates specifically to our existing borrowings. So I note that there's obviously proposal for pay down of some of the debts that we have there, but noting the interest rates that run on all but the sub-6 are now running quite considerably higher. With regards to the loan for Fletcher Park, the depot upgrade, and the NRUP 2, is there any opportunity for council to look at those debts being paid down at a higher rate or sooner, so that we clear our outstanding debts to the point where we only have sub-6 remaining? And I assume sub-6 remains there because there are some people who are still paying it off over the 7-year period that we offered them in the beginning. Mr. Old?
Through you, Mayor, that is always the option. I'll be honest, and I would not recommend that. There's actually no or little savings to interest that will occur, having done this previously. The way that the debt facility is structured with WATC, we would have to pay whatever the interest would have been if we went to the full term of the loan, being not a traditional housing loan, if you want to put it that way. We can definitely get a quote. There's no harm in doing that. But without having actually looked at the loan agreement here, I'd anticipate it'd be the same as most other local governments, where there's you would have to pay what you would have paid, even if you paid off early. So the only benefit would be you remove the loan off your books, you don't save any cash.
So what you're saying is that the interest that we get charged, there's no benefit in you trying to pay it off sooner. What do they just charge you the interest regardless? Is that what you're saying? Regardless of when you pay it off.
That is correct. Yep, the structure of the loan that we take out is as such. Yep.
All right. Thank you. Those were some of the questions that I wanted to ask tonight. Are there any other questions from other elected members with regards to the budget? No, not seeing any other questions. All right, well, there were no other items that were indicated for questions to be asked for this evening. So that then now takes us through towards the end of the agenda. Item 15 on the agenda is committee reports. There are none. Item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given. There are nil. Item 17, public participation time, which I open at 8:15 p.m, but noting there's no members of the public remaining in the gallery, it gets closed at 8:15 p.m. Item 18 is questions from elected members without notice on general matters. Are there any? Councillor Melrosa.
Does anyone in the town know if the significant tree nomination registers are being actioned?
Go to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. My understanding is that they are open and able to be accessed, but I'll just take that on notice. Yep, find out.
Any other questions from elected members? Councillor Melrosa.
I had 3, but I can only remember 2. I think I asked this a little while ago, but updates on the repairs to the bike lanes for Archer Street, they are still wanting for fixing.
Going to go to Ms. Adams on that score.
Thank you. There has been, I think, as of even this week, there have been site meetings and inspections on them. So there have been some works undertaken on the curbing and also on the planting and the irrigation. But we acknowledge there are still some works outstanding.
That's it, Councillor Melrosa. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a couple of questions. They're largely directed towards operations. Ms. Adams, would you be able to give us an indication of how we are tracking with regards to completion of the McCallum Park active zone, given that was originally proposed that we would be finished around the end of June 2025, and I know that elected members got to have a site tour a few weeks ago which showed it was progressing very well. But do you have any idea of how much longer we have to go before it is complete?
Thank you, Mayor. Hopefully not too much longer. I understand there is an inspection at the end of this week where we'll be conducting inspection with the contractor just to go through what we call our practically complete inspection. So we'll have a better update after that.
All right, thank you. I did send through an elected member request for information after elected members had been given the opportunity for a site walkthrough to ask the question about a sound system for the park area, and the answer that came back indicated that there was an option for sound capability, I'll call it that, to be installed at the site, although that wasn't a part of the contract works, and some costings were going to be obtained from the contractor. Do you have an update on whether the costings are available as yet? Because I'm quite acutely aware of the fact that we're getting ready to adopt a budget, and if it is the case that there are costings that can be known about that capability, it might be the case that Council wants to consider whether that's a possibility to be included in the new budget. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I know that we did provide an estimate, and I'll have to take on notice to find out whether or not we do have that back from the contractor.
All right. I'm not going to make you take it on notice because that will put it through to the July Ordinary Council meeting, which might be a bit late, but I'll follow it up with the elected member email request. My next one is a progress report on Elizabeth Bailey Park upgrade. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mayor, the works are progressing. I went through today with the team some of the status. So we've had a number of the bulk earthworks undertaken, walls set out, some of the works around the playground. We're just looking, procurement of works for the playground. So I can give a more detailed update, but the works are progressing in line with the expectations and program.
All right, thank you. And I know that there's been a social media post to that effect, and I think some email to elected members. But for the benefit of our community, is the town's administration of the view that every last part of the bulk verge collection has now been completed? Ms Adams.
Madam Mayor, yes, to the best of my knowledge. That's correct.
All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Anyone else with questions? Deputy Mayor Ife.
Thank you, Mayor Fernan. Your question about McCallum Park Active reminded me of a question that I had about McCallum Park Active. When I was walking past on a beautiful weekend recently, I did notice some young people using the McCallum Park Active Zone on their scooters on a lovely sunny Saturday afternoon, which seemed super fun, but I was actually worried about safety given that the space isn't yet finished. Town staff aware of this, and what steps can be taken to make sure there's some safe happenings?
Has actually been reported a number of times. I think I sent an elected member email through to the CEO probably 4 to 6 or longer weeks ago. And yes, there have been reports. I've even reported it to Rangers myself on a weekend when I've gone past and found people in there riding their skateboards. So the contractors, I think, told us at the site walkthrough, been doing the best they can to try and keep the site secure, but let's just say intrepid skaters will do what intrepid skaters will do to get on our very exciting skate park, even though it's not finished. Ms Adams?
Thank you. Through the chair, Mayor's correct. It's actually not a town site. It's actually controlled by the contractor, who is aware of the issue and has done what they can and is doing what they can, but it is difficult to keep people out.
It's that good. It's difficult to keep skaters out.
If I was younger, I would have joined in myself, to be fair.
Fair enough. Finally, are there any final questions from elected members without notice? General matters? No. Item 19, confidential matters, we have none. So at 8:21 p.m, we'll declare the agenda briefing forum is closed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, members of the staff, for tonight, and those who joined us on live streaming. Good evening.